You may have the courage to look up.
We've had triumphs, made some mistakes.
Fill this out in triplicate, $5 filing charge.
See?
1 month to process. You get it in 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Sometimes longer, but you could get lucky. Next, please.
That is your receipt for your husband. Thank you. And this is my receipt for your receipt.
Fill this out in triplicate, $5 filing charge. Next, please. Fill this out in triplicate. Next, please. Fill this out in triplicate. Next, please.
I think it's too large. I would like to see it smaller. I would like to see it scaled down. I think that within the Beltway, that they don't realize what's going around in our country.
Bureaucracy is the machinery of government. The complex, often cumbersome mechanism that turns laws into regulations and services affecting virtually every aspect of public life.
Of course it's too big. I mean, it's just sort of a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, it's too big, it's too this, it's too that. But I don't have a lot of experience with federal bureaucracy to really say that.
Much of the bureaucracy, I think, is needed to carry on the complicated life that we have.
Without legislation tomorrow, benefit checks to 3 million veterans and their survivors will be delayed.
We want to balance the budget now.
This administration...
People in the United States often grumble about the cost of maintaining the machinery and the slow pace at which it moves.
No one denies, at its root, the federal shutdown is unfair.
But when faced with the prospect of losing services and programs we take for granted, we realize just how much we rely on the federal bureaucracy.
We have a hospital to run regardless of what Congress and the administration chooses to do right now.
The federal bureaucracy is often viewed as impersonal and remote. Yet behind every small business loan, every Social Security check, every Medicare payment is a human face. In one federal agency alone, more than 4,000 men and women in regional offices across the country are working to bring government to the people it's designed to serve.
The Healthcare Financing Administration is the federal agency that administers the Medicare and the federal part of the Medicaid programs.
Could you file those authorization requests?
We are here where the proverbial rubber meets the road. We deal with the healthcare community, the beneficiaries, where it's all happening. It's being on the cutting edge of a field that's so fascinating and ever-changing as healthcare that I think is exciting and ever interesting. One never gets bored. HCFA has traditionally been an organization where people do stay for a long time. I came here in 1970 and have been here ever since. It's a close-knit agency. It's a very effective agency with absolutely outstanding people who have accomplished impossible things in implementing a lot of the legislation that's come about.
Among the federal programs affected by recent legislation is Medicare, which provides health insurance for 37 million elderly and disabled Americans.
The Medicare program is a very complex program, difficult to understand at best. And our job is to try to make it as simple as possible for beneficiaries to understand.
Could you tell me if you've got a provider number on this new application?
Sure.
Okay,
4551 has been assigned to late June.
In addition to explaining the program to beneficiaries, our job is to explain the program to the professional healthcare community also.
I'll try to schedule him in to meet with her then. Okay. And then
we have a lot of one-on-one
should
communication.
Be there by 11. So
get telephone calls and visits from individual hospital administrators, physicians, nursing home administrators, home health agency administrators.
Have we had any follow-up from the National Medical Association?
We make a lot of speeches to various organizations, beneficiary organizations, and physician organizations, hospital organizations. We produce newsletters that we send out to the beneficiaries explaining various aspects of the program. What I do and what all of us here do is the business of overseeing all of those different relationships to make sure that all of them are carried out in accordance with the law and regulations.
Okay, and we've got people in Baltimore.
Probably the most important skill or ability someone needs in this position is the ability to interact with many different people and different kinds of organizations, to withstand pressures from a lot of different directions that come at you all the time. But it's the ability to be open to a very complex world that is Medicare and Medicaid, and to listen to all of the different voices that are talking to us, and there are many different voices.
It isn't easy to prepare a meal for someone who can't talk, can't walk.
This budget is a great contradiction in terms, without any question.
They said they would not even continue to talk unless we agreed right now to make deep and unconscionable cuts in Medicare and Medicaid.
We work for the president. There's no question about that. And if there's an argument between the president and Congress, we take our orders from the president. Congress, or the legislative branch, makes the laws, and then the executive branch carries out the laws, implements the laws. We are part of the executive branch, and specifically the Department of Health and Human Services, and we function under the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Getting a new president usually means getting a new secretary of HHS, and that usually means getting a new administrator of HCFA, because all of those positions are politically appointed. It has very little effect on the administration of the program because the law, the regulations, the policies, the implementation of the program goes on.
I think this vote on whether or not HCFA will have the resources, which means...
Because the Medicare and Medicaid programs affect so many people and represent such a large portion of the federal budget, they constitute major political issues for the president, for Congress, and for interest groups. And HCFA is very much involved in the political process.
We get involved with explaining to both the executive branch and the legislative branch why we're doing the way we're doing it, based on our perception of problems and problems that we hear about and see evidence of. We make recommendations for changing the law to try to solve those problems. The Office of Management and the Budget controls the budgets of all federal agencies, including ours. Our budgets flow to the department, to the Secretary of HHS, and from there to OMB. But there's no question that OMB has considerable control over what happens in our agency because they do control the budget. Depending on the mood of Congress, depending on the national deficit, we may get considerably less than we asked for one year than, say, the previous year. We almost never get what we ask for, nor I assume does any agency. When Congress passes a law affecting Medicare and Medicaid, then HCFA is the agency within HHS given responsibility for implementing that law, and that in most cases involves the writing of regulations, which spell out in more detail what the law has provided.
This budget marks the end of an era.
For example, right now we're in the middle of implementing the most comprehensive piece of Medicare legislation since the program was signed into law in 1965. The Balanced Budget Act of 1997 brought us more changes than has ever been the case since the law was signed into effect. And our administrator is right now trying to persuade Congress that we need more resources than they've given us.
DeParle, the Minister of HCFA, I want to read what she says in her letter.
The Balanced Budget Act was driven to a great extent by the desire to protect the Medicare Trust Fund and to extend its life and to make Medicare a viable program for the future. Because when the baby boom generation becomes eligible for Medicare, the demands on the system are going to be great and the costs are going to skyrocket. I think Medicare will be here, but we're not without problems. The program is not without problems. The funding of it is not without problems, and it's going to take the combined intelligence and good sense and creative thinking and hard work of a lot of people to produce legislation that will guarantee its future.
Many people who work in government, especially those who make it a career, see it as a way to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree.
On one level, there's the opportunity to influence and implement public policy. On a more personal level, there's a chance to serve the needs of ordinary citizens who could easily be neighbors, family, or friends. So while we often think of the federal bureaucracy as remote and impersonal, behind its institutional walls is a virtual army of men and women working on our behalf.
Receiving a call, plane down. Repeat, plane down.
When ValueJet Flight 592 crashed in the Florida Everglades, claiming the lives of everyone on board, the startup discount airline was immediately the subject of intense public scrutiny.
I'm determined to do everything I can to make sure that American aviation is the safest in the world.
Look at it. You know, that's what happened to my mother.
Hoping to reassure the public about ValueJet's fleet, where the average plane is over 25 years old, the FAA announced an unprecedented inspection program.
This will include special examinations for aircraft corrosion and the required...
The Federal Aviation Administration is the government agency that oversees the nation's air travel industry.
We operate the world's largest air traffic control system, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And the fundamental mission of the FAA is to provide for a safe, secure, and efficient air transportation system in the United States. When there is a tragic accident of significant magnitude, there is a lot of interest because the American public expects that their government, through the executive branch and through the congressional branch, will be taking appropriate actions to ensure their safety and security.
Within the hierarchy of the federal bureaucracy, the FAA is part of the Department of Transportation.
The DOT was created in the late 60s in order to combine all of the different transportation modes under one umbrella organization.
When an incident such as an airline crash or train derailment occurs, the National Transportation Safety Board steps in to determine the cause.
Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are on the scene and have begun their inquiry. All of the investigative reports will be brought together, and the National Transportation Safety Board will...
The NTSB is a totally independent agency of the government. The chairman reports directly to the president, and their role is to investigate transportation accidents and to make recommendations as a result of their findings from their actions.
It's also the responsibility of the NTSB to recommend changes that will improve the safety of the nation's transportation systems.
They have no power or authority to make any of those recommendations happen. They can only make them as suggestions. Our job is to then take those recommendations and, depending upon what they are and how we analyze them, put them into effect to increase safety.
The National Transportation Safety Board had many years prior recommended that smoke detectors be put in the cargo holds. But the FAA responded, after many years' delay, no, it would cost $350 million, and it was too much for the industry.
The FAA has been criticized for failing to adopt NTSB proposals to make airplanes and air travel safer. Like many government agencies, the FAA has at times been underfunded and understaffed, constraints that affect its ability to monitor aviation safety.
It has been historically somewhat difficult to deal with the current budget process, which is essentially an annual process. And I mention that because that's connected to our ability to develop programs to modernize the air traffic management system, to have the right size workforce.
In recent years, efforts to achieve a balanced budget have led to cuts that some say have compromised the FAA's performance.
I don't think budget cuts have affected them so much as a lack of efficiency in certain areas. I keep going back to this modernization of the air traffic control system. For years now, the only bureaucracy in the federal government that still purchases vacuum tubes is the Federal Aviation Administration, because they're still using that kind of equipment in our air traffic control system. That's a little scary when you think of the kinds of airplanes that equipment used to control, the propeller-driven aircraft, as to what they're trying to control now.
There is always that constant struggle to address the issue of how much service, how much regulation, how many air traffic controllers are enough, how many inspectors are enough, what's too many, what's too little. But the budget that we receive currently is adequate to pay for the cost of the services that we provide, and we believe that the level of services we currently provide reflect what the public expects for services from us.
Some people argue that those services are not always adequate, and that airline deregulation has put added pressures on the FAA.
The FAA was established to promote aviation, to help secure our defenses in the world, and to carry the mails. But the trouble is that the FAA didn't evolve beyond those initial missions of promoting into being the tough watchdog that it has to be in a deregulated environment.
Since deregulation, we've had numerous carriers, and ValueJet is one of them, that comes into existence trying to squeeze the eagle off the dollar, and in doing so, they can only afford to operate at or close to the legal minimums.
We have a lot of low-fare airlines that have a different approach to their operation, say, than the older, quote, traditional or mature airlines did. So we have to make sure that we're paying close attention to that. All of this obviously puts a strain on the air traffic management system, so we've had to grow and keep up with the impact of that as well.
Deregulation, because of its basic increase in competition, thereby lowering fares, thereby increasing the number of Americans that make use of aviation, created a lot more work for the FAA to do. But I believe that airline deregulation has been one of the best things that's ever happened to America, because it has given Americans who had never had the opportunity to fly from one part of our country or one part of the world to another.
Some federal agencies and departments are criticized because of what is known as the Iron Triangle, a powerful alliance of mutual benefit among an agency, an interest group, and a congressional committee. One criticism leveled at the FAA is that it's too close to the very industry it's supposed to regulate.
When we hire aviation safety inspectors, we hire people who are typically 40 years old, have 15, 16, 17 years of service in the industry, because those are the kinds of people we need in order to be able to do the job we do. So there is constant contact between the industry, the aviation community as such, and the FAA workforce.
There have been times when I think there's been some credence to the allegations that the airline industry has played too great a role in the formulation of FAA policy, but that has related directly to the quality of the director of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Today, the agency is guided by new leadership and a new mandate to toughen its stance on air travel safety.
We have in this organization nearly 50,000 men and women who are absolutely and truly dedicated to the safety and security and efficiency of this system. So, if nothing else, I would like to assure the American public that the people that they expect to do the job for them are doing it very well and to the best of their ability.
What do we need? We need the NTSB to have more authority to make and enforce the changes. We have to privatize the air traffic control, limit the influence of lobbyists and political action committees.
You could build an airplane for $1 billion that would never have an accident. I mean, it's a fact, you could. The only problem is the airplane would cost so much that nobody could afford to ride it. So there's always a careful balance between safety, which has to be paramount, but also cost, which would prevent someone from being able to fly from one place to another.
On a jet plane, I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh, babe, I hate to go.
I have always stated that the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth is a government program.
Like many others in government, President Ronald Reagan recognized that when it comes to the federal bureaucracy, there is no easy road to reform.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving, they just use your mind and they never give you credit.
But reform is exactly what the Clinton administration had in mind when it launched a major initiative to bring about the end of big government and big spending.
I've been working for the federal government since the Nixon administration. And I think every president launched a new reform, and some presidents launched two. And for the most part, they've just disappeared without footprints. The thing that was different about this one was the role of the vice president.
You know in your heart that given the opportunity, you can accomplish something that is really worthwhile. What you told us is that if the very heart of the system is changed from a system of central control.
He had a vision at the beginning to bring the quality revolution that swept American business in the 80s into the federal government.
And trust in our people to achieve the goals, then you, the federal workers, will make the federal government work better and cost less. And you
The difference was, after the report was submitted, Gore went back to his office and made sure it got done.
When the Clinton-Gore administration first came into office and Vice President Gore launched his National Performance Review, they looked across the board, across the government, at virtually every department, agency, and operation. With each agency involved, it was bottom-up and top-down, trying to identify areas in which the government was simply not operating as effectively and efficiently as it could.
Why aren't you charging off every morning with fresh enthusiasm? Why aren't the taxpayers saying, oh, thank goodness for those federal employees? Let me tell you what the government did to make my life easier and better today. Instead, of course, taxpayers say, let me tell you what the government did to me today, not for me today.
One of many federal agencies targeted for reform was the Department of Defense. The DoD has always been one of government's biggest spenders.
You're talking about the world's largest buying organization. And over the last number of years, we've been engaged in a very aggressive effort to reinvent, reform, change the way we do things.
This is a telephone that was specially developed for the Navy for use on aircraft carriers. They use it on an aircraft carrier to call from one part of the ship to the other. Joe, I need to see you. Click. This is designed by specification to work after the ship sinks. Now, this phone costs $350. This is the old Defense Department. The USS Stennis, our newest aircraft carrier, uses these phones. This costs $35. If the ship sinks and you refloat the ship, forget about the phone. You're out another $35. I think this is a metaphor for everything in the Department of Defense.
In making these reforms, one of the biggest obstacles is the bureaucracy itself.
It's difficult because the government is huge.
It's an enormous, enormous institution with a whole plethora of cultures that are well embedded. And that's probably the biggest challenge you face in terms of trying to overcome an entrenched bureaucracy that is sort of used to doing things the old way. You've got the red tape issue, and then you have to figure out how you access the technological world that provides you with what you need.
They used to buy all their computer chips to government specifications and test them to government specifications. When Hewlett-Packard buys chips from Texas Instruments, they don't test them. They have a deal with Texas Instruments. You make them so they work. The government was paying 10 times what the commercial sector was paying for chips, and they were getting chips of less quality. Now DoD is buying most of their stuff commercially. Huge change.
To make such sweeping changes requires more than a presidential mandate. It takes congressional support.
Much of the craziness that was done in government procurement was done in compliance with a body of laws that had been made ever so more restrictive year after year.
We have insisted that very intensive research and development be done before procurement and production, because otherwise we may find ourselves with an item that doesn't work.
We could not have reformed government procurement had Congress not changed the law.
So it's been a remarkable partnership between the administration at large and the committees of jurisdiction on the Hill.
I would like now to call on my great friend and partner in this effort, Senator Noy.
There was a recognition that the system's broke, and we had to fix it. And we haven't quite fixed it yet, but it's not quite as broke as it used to be.
There's always room for improvement because we are dealing with such complex, highly technological matters.
In some ways, acquisition reform has been one of the great experiments, most successful experiments in American government in recent history. I mean, we can chart out the major changes to the culture and to the way we do things in dollars and cents and in philosophy and approach.
We've attempted to calculate the money that has been saved by reinvention, and it's $137 billion. Our measure of success is show me the revolution.
Everything that needs to be done for a veteran can be done in so much less time than it's taken previously.
Most Americans aren't going to read their newspapers and analyze whether government's working better.
This is the first chance they've had to make a real, lasting impact.
But most Americans have their own way of judging.
She was just awesome. I just can't get over the service that I got.
If a letter that was mailed yesterday is delivered today, that's government working better. If they call the Social Security 1-800 number and they're treated as well as American Express or Disney treats them, that's government working better. We want to show Americans through their own experience with these agencies that government's been transformed.